Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Geesaman Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather we live in extraordinary ones, where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives and beings to share resources that can help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes, our 13-month depth training, Refugia, and sign up for our beautiful newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. We are 100% listener-funded and ad-free and invite you to consider becoming a supporter of this podcast with a donation. You can find more at embodimentmatters.com/podcast. Hello, listener friends. This is Erin here with my beloved Carl, and we are so excited to share this conversation with you today. This is the third in a series we've been recording that are related to our upcoming 13-month depth training called Refugia. And we began with practices of presence and why they matter. We then went into practices of depth and soul and why they matter. And today we're going to be exploring practices of reconnection and remembrance and why they matter. And we're really delighted to get into this conversation with you and explore, whether you're interested in and or participating in our Refugia training or not, this topic of reconnecting and remembering is so relevant for so many of us. And we hope that you find some inspiration and benefit from this conversation. So I want to start with a quote from our beloved Jaiya John, poet, teacher, psychologist, incredible writer, who says, "It is not that we have so much to learn, it's that we have so much to remember. We are alive in the colonizing centuries of the great forgetting. Let us journey now into this new era upon us of the great remembering. We need teachers gifted not at cold instruction, but at loving reunion. We need homecoming." So beautiful. And that's really the intention of this training, this conversation. And let's do a little bit of that before we go deeper into the conversation and start with reconnecting in this moment with feeling underneath you, whatever position you're in. You can feel this living relationship with the earth who's offering unconditional support. So let's just take a moment, maybe 10 seconds, to breathe with that and maybe give our weight a little more generously over to gravity and to this support. So we can remember that we're held and we're not alone. We reconnect with this great mother underfoot who is supporting us in countless ways, in a felt way, through the body. And maybe like me, when you do that, there's some natural inclination to gratitude, like, wow, thank you. How long I've ignored this unconditional support. And there you are, nonetheless, giving all the beauty, all the food, all the everything of our lives, this great Mother Earth. So let's take a moment quietly or out loud, wherever you are, to perhaps, if it feels authentic to you, hum or speak or dance or just send out the vibes of, to the earth. We know you're there. Thank you. We love you. And we care about what's happening to you, with you. And for me, always, dedicating this work toward the thriving life of this great earth, which includes all her creations. And we can reconnect with our breath. And just feel that as we're breathing, we're not breathing alone. We're breathing breath that is shared with the green world, the plankton and the oceans and the trees and plants around us, and breath that we're probably sharing with each other. Breath and air that may be moved through the bodies of animals, human ancestors, more than human ancestors. So here we are, remembering, getting reconnected just in a very simple way. And I want to invite you, Carl, to start us off with what you'd like to bring.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm just savoring the flavor of reconnecting to the earth, reconnecting to my body, reconnecting to this sense of being woven into the living fabric of life. And I also just appreciate that Jaya quote so much and how these 500 years or so or more of the great forgetting can often just feel like all there is because it's all that we've known. And I've found it so helpful in different contexts. Joanna Macy brought a version of this. Francis Weller brings a different version. But to look at the time frame of life on this planet, of the life of humanity on this planet, and one of those that I really like is looking at generations. And we could say it's 1 to 2 generations since the technological revolution, and how much our behaviors and habits and ways of interacting with the world have changed. And then 20 generations to back to industrial revolution, which also is the shifting of education and sitting in desks and chairs all day, real kind of loss of the long-standing mentoring relationships, 600 generations to agriculture, and then at least 200,000 generations. Like that's our ancestors, wherever you're from, to think of this long tail of 200,000 generations of relatives that were alive and in animate relationship with the world and the living earth, and just how much has changed in the view in these 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,500 years of great forgetting, and how much we have to draw on in that deep, deep ancestry. I think that's so important to come back to. Like, as the line from Josh Schrei says, animism, a sense of being embedded in a living world, is normative consciousness. Like, that is what's normal as far as human beings on this planet, and what's off is capitalism and white supremacy and all of the things, the waters that we've been swimming in. And I think as we go forward, remembering those deep roots backwards and finding ways of reconnecting with that is so important. I want to bring also a line from the late, great John Trudell. All human beings are descendants of tribal people who were spiritually alive, intimately in love with the natural world, children of Mother Earth. When we were tribal people, we knew who we were, we knew where we were, we knew our purpose. This sacred perception of reality remains alive and well in our genetic memory. We all carry it inside us, usually in a dusty box in the mind's attic, but it's always accessible. And that for me is really so much of the root of our work. Like, what are practices that help us open that dusty box and remember different ways of being in this world?
I just want to bring in, after all that beauty and that connection, I love that sense of the long tail of, you know, what did you say? How many generations of
At least,
the
at least
last one?
200,000 com
Pre-agricultural.
compared to 20
Yeah.
to industrial revolution.
Yeah, that's a wealth to remember in our bones, in our DNA, in our souls, and our connections with our ancestors. I'm also thinking of the future ones and remembering and getting reconnected with ourselves in this flow of time, not just this lifetime, you know? And I've shared this story on another podcast, I believe that I did with Leilani in the past, but I want to tell it again because it was a really such a moving moment in my life. We live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and maybe 15 plus years ago, we had a grand opening of this gorgeous building of the new Utah Museum of Natural History. It went from its old, dark, stuffy confines at the university to this beautiful building. Highly recommend visiting if you come to town. It's gorgeous. And on opening day, I went and I took our baby, our son, who's now 15, was tiny, breathing, strapped to my chest in the little ergo baby carrier. And they opened the doors, and with all the crowd who had gathered for opening day, we walked inside, and they have stenciled on the walls throughout the museum some beautiful, inspiring words. And there was one early on in the walk through the museum from local wonderful writer Terry Tempest Williams. And I was so struck by her words. Really, it feels like it was a life-changing moment. So I stood there with this little baby strapped to my chest, and I read her words. I might cry saying this again, where she says, "The eyes of the future are looking back, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time." And I felt that not only with this future one who was then a baby and is now 6'1" tall teenager and him as a future one, but you know, all the future generations that we weren't, in most people I connect with who were raised in conventional culture weren't connected to think about our impact on these future ones. And contextualizing this life in the context of that flow with this deep tale in our ancestry and this connection with the future ones. I want to read this quote that I love. This comes from Dar Jamal. He says, and this feels like a remembering to me, of a sanity those ancient ancestors knew. He says, "I remember my obligations taught to me by a Native American elder of Cherokee descent, Stan Rushworth, that we are born onto this planet with the obligations of caring for it and of making decisions based on what will be best for all the future generations of all species. So each morning I awake and engage in my morning practice, part of which is pondering what I shall do each day to serve Earth and all her species. When I approach my life from this perspective, no matter how bleak the future appears, I always have work to do and services to perform." That just feels like such an important remembering ourselves in this context of deep time and how actually, you were bringing this, Carl, in our conversation about practices. I think it was about practices of presence, that framing of the present moment as not narrow, but it includes the past and the future. Like, we're touching that in any moment right now. So I'm really moved to be invited, even as an adult, to begin to remember this sane orientation, sane, beautiful, dignifying orientation toward life. No matter how bleak it is, I can do something that serves. I love that. It helps my heart today very much as we're talking about this during wild times in this intro to 2026.
Yeah. And it also seems so connected to what we talked about in our podcast around practices of depth and soul, around what it means to be an adult. Like this sense of sacred responsibilities rather than how many toys can I get? How much can I consume? And also as a culture, can we shift from this, the US revealing its very adolescent nature right now, an unhealed nature, and this sense of imagining what could happen if that dynamic turned toward more people inhabiting their sacred responsibility of being here.
Hmm. I think many of us weren't blessed with that orientation. I was saying in another conversation, it's so much more about competing with each other, just trying to make enough money to get ahead, stay on top of things, not end up on the streets. It's hard. Even just that is hard. And remembering this connection, this dignifying possibility to contextualize ourselves in this deep time story. I just love that so much.
Yeah, I want to bring a quote that Francis Weller has often shared of Paul Shepard. The grief and daily sense of loss that we often interpret as a failure in our personality is actually a feeling of emptiness where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. And I love this because it shows that what we often take as a fault, a way that we don't fit in, a way that the world doesn't fit us, is actually this wisdom, this longing, this part of us that should have encountered this beautiful and strange otherness in the context of relationship with land, relationship with dreams, with initiation, all of this beautiful and strange otherness that has been there for this long tail of our time on this planet that isn't there, and it feels off.
Mm. Okay, I got another Jaya quote tapping me on the shoulder while you're talking about that and what feels off. Of course we feel off in the insanity of this current iteration of civilization. And this is from his new book, Wildflowers Praying at Midnight. Highly recommend. It's beautiful. Here we go. Some souls see this world so clearly because they come from other worlds. I mean, I'm thinking of that, Carl, that connection with the deep time might be the other world.
Mhm.
Contrast blesses their seeing. If this is you, let your vision be the medicine you pour us. To do this, stay indigenous to lands, people, and ancestral soulfulness you come from. Don't lose your way trying to fit in. Work on your memory of home. Infuse our normal with your nature. Do not dilute yourself. Dilute our malignancy with your essence. Inhabit our molecules. Change our atmosphere forever. I love that.
Chills.
Mm. So I want to name as part of our um, territory we're exploring here and the way we've contextualized this in the curriculum for Refugia about practices of reconnection and remembrance includes deep ecology and the work that reconnects practices. We deeply draw on that beautiful lineage and remembering our embeddedness in this wider network of kinship that is not just human, is not just present time, and understanding embodiment not as practices to reinforce the lonely, separate human self, but approaching embodiment as a doorway back into interbeing. Of course, we work with practices of presence through the body, as we talked about in that other episode, and really deepening this sense of our connection with the web of life, with that great and strange otherness. It's like I often think of this as slipping out of the too tight clothes of the modern story, of hyper individualism, of that separateness that makes us so lonely and stressed. It's like, you know, that feeling when you take off too tight clothes or something, and it's just this, ah, back in comfortable home space again. And that can be nurtured as we reconnect and remember. Um, and so one more piece, we've got embodiment as interbeing and deep ecology, and also thanksgiving and praise as a practice of reconnecting and remembering. And in the work that reconnects, we often start the spiral with this practice of gratitude. And it's not the kind of forced gratitude that makes you have to ignore everything that's stressful, but yes, with grief, with stress, with everything else that is happening. Um, you know, the way I wrote about this in our description on the webpage for Refugia is reviving soul manners, radical gratitude. That just means deep rooted gratitude and the practice of praise to nourish kinship and right relationship with the wider world, and understanding Thanksgiving as a primary soul responsibility. That also, this is not just for ourselves to feel better, but to remember and come back into this relationship of gratitude and reciprocity with the world. And I've learned so much about this. I know so many of us have through Robin Wall Kimmerer's teachings and her gorgeous book, Braiding Sweetgrass. I want to bring a quote that is from near the end of that book. She says, "More than anything, I want to hear a great song of thanks rise on the wind. I think that song might save us. The moral covenant of reciprocity calls us to honor our responsibilities for all we have been given, for all that we have taken. It is our turn now, long overdue. It is our turn now, long overdue to feed that great song of thanks, and how that weaves us back into connection again to say, wow, any bite of food we've eaten today, in fact, in our whole lives, is weaves us into countless relationships with beings and this generous giving earth. And to recognize that and say thank you again and again is it's like I'm thinking of that saying one of our teachers used to use, Carl, about like the fountain also gets wet. Like when we say thank you, you can't help but get that vibe all over yourself. And it is good for us as well, but also to understand that as a responsibility to offer gratitude for what we've been given. That's a beautiful way to live. Yeah, I'll just pause right there. I'm seeing so many alternate ways people are orienting toward the world right now, people in power in our country's administration. That is the exact opposite of this. It's entitlement, it's demand, it's extraction. And there's something so beautiful about remembering to give that authentic thanks, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, coming to mind is deep gratitude for Martin Prechtel
Mm,
and strong influence that he's had on both of our lives and the commitment he has in his teachings and in his school toward rehydrating these indigenous seeds that are in all of us. And the line, I don't know if I have the beginning, but when you can't remember what to do, what to say, when all the other teachings elude you, always remember this. Always feed what needs feeding. Always make beauty.
mhm,
And that another way of remembering this responsibility that we are here to feed, to feed so many aspects of relationship that need feeding, and to generate, to praise, to make beauty.
Hmm. I love that. Makes my heart so happy to remember and talk about it. And it's absolutely um, a kind of soul activism in consumerist culture to do this practice because it does have an effect on our wanting, on that insatiable, not willing to be satisfied with what we have, always needing more, comparing ourselves to the ultra rich and feeling like, oh, we don't have fill in the blank, but then to pause and look around, I'm thinking of um, the Thanksgiving address and Robin Wall Kimmerer sharing that in Braiding Sweetgrass, the Mohawk version of that prayer, and her asking an elder for permission to share it. I believe it was Chief Oren Lyons, and he says, "Well, please share it. If people would have understand the Thanksgiving 500 years ago when they came to this land, we would not be in this mess." And in that culture, the understanding, they call it the words before all else, just to imagine starting the day, starting a meeting at work, starting, I don't know, anything, a meal, a gathering with your friends with words of thanks and to see we have waters. There are still birds that are not extinct that are singing right outside my window. There's sun shining. There are beautiful humans, like on and on. Once you start turning in this direction, it's like, wow, I don't even have enough time for all the thanks I want to offer to the world. And that feels like an important kind of activism right now as well, when so it's very easy to slip toward despair and fear and worry. So, not as the only practice, but as one important practice to also engage like this.
Hmm.
And I want to read one more piece I wrote on about these facets of practice on our webpage for Refugia about reweaving the tattered cloak of belonging, coming home to interbeing, and blowing on the embers of your innate belonging through embodied ecology and soulful participation with life. So I'm just feeling these two going together. This reviving soul manners and the gratitude practice does weave us back into this felt sense of belonging from the tattered cloak or that frayed sense of I'm alone, I don't have connections, I don't have support to turn again in these directions feel just so nourishing and so important as a remembering and a
Hmm.
reconnecting. Mhm.
Yeah. And it also feels so connected to what we talked about in our Depth and Soul podcast around our soul medicine,
Mhm.
that becoming who we are is more of a practice of remembering, returning to the thread that William Stafford describes, or the way that James Hillman used the image of the acorn, that the acorn has the full oak tree in it all along. It doesn't need certifications on how to be an oak tree. It doesn't need trainings on how to be an oak tree. It needs to remember itself as the oak tree in process. And I think that's such a different way of like aiming towards some future self who is somehow different and more evolved than we are versus like how do I keep relaxing more and more fully into myself?
Mm.
And that theme weaves through so much of what we teach around meditation or movement or musical intelligence or ritual intelligence. It's this kind of getting used to deeper aspects of who we are, remembering those innate human qualities that deepen through soulful repetition and practice, but it's not outside of ourselves.
I'm also moved when you're using the acorn image that, as you said, it needs remembering, but it also needs soil. It also
Yes.
needs appropriate weather and water and context where it can grow. And for us to consider, like, what are the conditions that help our acorn to become its oak tree self, and as we've talked about also in a recent podcast, practice is so helpful. We've been doing a lot of this work for more than 30 years. And it's lifelong for us because it's so easy to forget. So, this remembering and having whatever kind of support, um, I think of it as a steady drumbeat. Like, okay, it's like setting ourselves up for success. I have a time where I practice remembering. I have morning meditation practice. I have a weekly meeting where I'm doing this, or, I love that inquiry around what is the soil and water and sunlight that would support your acorn to really be able to mature. We don't always get to choose, there's a lot of it that, as Ram Dass would call it, it's our given karma that we have to work with. But to whatever degree we can, turn toward that light that brings forth this kind of growth.
Yeah, and to support those soil conditions in your families, in your communities, in your circles of friends, like how do we attend to each other in ways that are fertilizing the soil of people becoming themselves?
Mm.
Wasn't something that I learned in eighth grade or whenever growing up.
Mhm. Mm.
I want to share something. So often when we hold these grief rituals, 4-day grief rituals with music and song and depth, even if people have never been in a ritual or don't have ritual practice in their life, there's this sense of a remembrance of it, like, oh, this is how we can be together. And I think that's a really important thing, that we can have contexts where we can remember, and that these kind of rituals are the original way that human beings worked with trauma and loss, and it wasn't alone in a therapist's office, but in community, in song, these old ways that are alive. And even if we've never tasted them before, when we're in the context, something ignites, like it comes forth.
Mhm. I love that. And ritually working with gratitude, right? Not just trauma and loss, but hey, this is how we offer our thanks and feed back life and the ancestors who gave us life again. Um, I'm just thinking about this phrase, and I think I heard this from Robin Wall Kimmerer first, biocultural restoration, which is, all this we're talking about, all these practices, all these ways of being can be dedicated to biocultural restoration, which just means restoring nature and culture. Restoring nature and culture. One person cannot do that alone, right? I'm thinking of when we interviewed Kathleen Dean Moore, and I was thinking of this week because the news is so horrific in the United States right now. And she said, I'm often asked, what can one person do? And she always answers quite emphatically, stop being one person. Like as our friend Leilani said, shift that me to a we. And, even just in our minds to think about, oh, there are actually millions of people around the world praying for peace, practicing reconnection. We don't hear about that in the news, but to remember them as well is such a wonderful part of this reconnection and remembrance. Um, and, really doing this life as a practice of intimacy with life. And of course, this feeds back to practices of presence. Like, this is not just theoretical. This is like how on this day, how your feet are meeting the ground, how you're breathing and aware that you're breathing with others and the trees, and maybe want to send out some blessings with that exhale. Or as Thich Nhat Hanh invited to, when you walk, kiss the earth with your feet, which when I first heard, I thought was kind of cute, but is such a profound deep invitation to come into this intimacy with life. You can do that theoretically, which is very different than feeling how your feet are right now coming back into connection with the earth beneath your feet. And I just got to bring this quote from Martin Prechtel in his beautiful book, Rescuing the Light, that I walk with. I'm thinking of this as kissing the earth with our feet because there's such a profound, to me, um, invitation in this pointing. He says, the people cannot be healed until the land is healed. The land cannot be healed until the people are healed by the land. That, wow, is such, I got goosebumps on my head, just like profound invitation to remembering and reconnecting. I'm going to say it one more time again. Maybe you will walk around carrying this when you go walking in the world as well. The people cannot be healed until the land is healed. The land cannot be healed until the people are healed by the land. I think that is so gorgeous. How do we come back into relationship, reconnect, and remember such that we can be healed by the land? And as Martins talks about wellness, not just separate self personal wellness, but he would say a place being well because you're in it, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah. And it brings me to the appreciation of exploring all this through movement.
Hmm.
Not a concept, but it's gestures. It is the actual contact of your foot on the ground. It is how you see and perceive the aliveness. It is the exchange of breath that when we move as animate aliveness in relationship with the sacred animate aliveness above us, behind us, to the sides, that changes so much about how we move. And again, in these last generations of the great forgetting amplified,
Hmm.
how many people don't touch the ground, don't reach behind themselves, are in a seated, flexed position for a good part of the day with the attention toward the sacred being a flat screen. And that's us too. We spend a lot of time in that position and in relation to the world that comes through phones and computers, and how to keep remembering that that's not all there is, that there is something, even as we're sitting here recording this through computers, that this room can be alive and my senses can be awake and I can be in an ecosystem. And you, dear listener,
Hmm.
same thing.
Hmm. Yeah, expanding that sense of you sometimes call it your kinesphere, the movement space around you. And I sometimes think of that when I'm at the grocery store walking around people who have so little spatial awareness of the people around them. It's like just to begin growing again this awareness of beings around us. Um,
Yeah. Or driving.
yeah.
Larger kids here. Won't
What
go
is my, we won't go there. What is my impact on the people around me? Yeah. Um, I'm thinking too about the beautiful phrase that Francis Weller has used often about village mindedness. And that's again coming back to the we from the separate me. And I think this is really interesting because we've talked about this a lot over the years. And um, having that sense of belonging in a community and the way that what we've talked about ripening our adult presence, healthy village requires adults and elders. And there's a dance between, I'm thinking of my card carrying super introvert self. Like, I need a lot of alone times. Part of that for me is not alone. It's about how do I connect with the dreaming earth, my ancestors, the images from my dreams that are asking me something, like, and then come back to community and just the reweaving ourselves back into something really different from loneliness, and um, how can we support each other? I just love that. I don't remember if I said this in one of our recent podcasts, but I'll bring it again. I'm thinking of being with our friend who we've interviewed a couple times too, Cynthia Jewers, amazing earth activist, Buddhist teacher, incredible um, ritualist who has buried earth treasure vases all around this planet, like little seeds of healing around the world. And we were talking about community and the future Buddha coming as Sangha, as community, not as a separate person. And she was quoting someone who, instead of using the word the guru, they say the gurup, Guroup, like, to come back to some reverence for what unfolds between us.
Hmm. Yeah. When you were talking about the like protection that's needed for remembering, and the line that Jaiya John offered you, Erin, of protect your spaciousness. And
Mm,
that so much of what we've talked about really for this whole series of podcasts needs our protection,
mm,
needs our remembrance over and over again, because the pace and the hustle and the crazy stimulation that we have as modern people will like pull us up and out of that, and how much it needs protection. And I just love the view from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that we have both practiced in for many years, of these short glimpses repeated over and over again, that these qualities are not that far away, but we need to have ways to refresh, and to come back, and to come back, and to lose it, and to come back, and to come back.
hmm I love that. Um, I'm thinking too about the phrase of that we've used frequently of the overculture, this dominating overculture. And I don't know, a few years ago started using the language of growing underculture, like not just in our heads, not up here trying to dominate our thoughts, feelings, bodies, relationships, each other, the world, etc. But you drop down, you feel your breath deep in your belly, you actually kiss the earth with your feet and feel earth also includes all those ancestors whose bodies are again a part of the earth. And I feel it like this, the underculture, like, dropping into something. I was using Clarissa Pinkola Estes's phrase about the river under the river, and how we um, can tune into something deeper than that dominating paradigm. And I also just want to name, I thought you were going to say this in our shared consciousness, Carl, but I'm sure you were in 30 seconds later anyway. But this perspective that I know is so core and important to both of us. And I'm remembering that in 1995, I got to meet a really important teacher for me, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, in Nepal, in the Himalayas, at his nunnery, just a few months before he died. It's a really incredible Dzogchen teacher. And he said the highest practice, and he said the highest yoga, but he was not someone with a physical yoga practice. He's talking about meditation and consciousness. The highest yoga is naturalness.
Mm.
And that flavored everything for me from that moment on. And the way we approach movement is not contorting yourself to fit somebody's idea of the right way and performing that. It's like, how do we take off the crusty mud of conditioning that blocks our naturalness? How do we meditate and uncover the natural brightness, intelligence, compassion of our minds and hearts? Um, uncontrived naturalness, remembering how we can do that with each other, with the earth, that this isn't some performance of perfection, but it's like the stripping away of, well, actually, I don't like that language stripping away as it came out of my mouth right now. My inner bullshit detectors are going off. I like this image of um, loving it into liberation, like that conditioning, because we were talking about in Depth and Soul podcast about how the genius hides behind the wound. So we don't just want to strip away and get rid of the painful conditioning, but when we can approach those tender, wounded, um, having been dominated and not allowed to be natural places with reverence, and then we can love that conditioning of the overculture into the liberation of the actual intelligence and life force that is within.
Hmm. Yeah, and I just want to give a nod to the beautiful term that came to you for the work that we do of being somatic naturalists.
Yeah.
We bring that the reverence of Mary Oliver, David Attenborough, Jane Goodall to this experience of soma and being alive in this world and not trying to fix, improve, but to deepen intimacy with our own naturalness.
Mhm.
I have another quote I want to bring. This is from a book I know has had a big impact on you, Erin J. Griffith's Wild.
Oh yeah, so good.
Because that's another thing about remembering is our wildness.
Hmm.
That's part of our naturalness that have trained out of us. And this line of what is wild cannot be bought or sold, borrowed or copied. It is unmistakable, unforgettable, unshameable, elemental as earth and ice, water, fire, and air, a quintessence, pure spirit, resolving into no constituents. Don't waste your wildness. It is precious and necessary.
Mm, that's so beautiful. I'm thinking of the wild also as, Wendell Berry's famous beloved poem about the peace of wild things. Sometimes we say wild and we think running amok out of control and not the deep sanity of the wild, I mean, where I know I and we go when we want to reconnect is to the wild, the sanity of the canyon and the mountains and like, oh, yeah, and to remember underneath that, as I was saying, that like crust of conditioning is that wilderness in us, in our awareness and our moving bodies. Um, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Carl.
Yeah. And I also want to bring the importance of the Buddhist term of Sangha or just community in remembering that we can help each other remember. We can help each other get back to what is most important and what is most essential. And we can kind of confirm each other that, oh, yeah, this dream you had, this journey you had, this art that's moving through you is deeply valuable and necessary. And to kind of break out of the trance of the overculture, it's necessary to have friends that mirror your naturalness and sanity.
I just want to weave this into this conversation. This is something that's been really important to me. And this comes from Joanna Macy and the work that reconnects. And it is the 5 vows of the Great Turning, which is a way to orient and remember. And I have these hanging on the wall in our kitchen so I can walk by and remember. And my friend Leilani Navarre and I recorded a podcast about this if you want to go deeper into the 5 vows. But I just want to bring them here because there's so much about reconnecting and remembering, and we'll be weaving these perspectives into Refugia. So the first is I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings. Again, we don't do it by ourselves. When we taught a class on the five vows last year, I added the word imperfectly on the end of each one of these. Commit myself to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings. And I think part of that is just remembering that, as you said earlier, we're not just here for ourselves. The second is I vow to live on earth more lightly, less violently, more lovingly, we like to add, not only in the food products and energy we consume, but how we are with our own body mind and our relationships, more lightly, less violently. The third, I think, is my favorite, and that is I vow to myself and to each of you to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future beings, and our siblings of all species. And every time I speak this, I need to name this vow is not when I get stressed out and start freaking out, then I will draw strength and guidance from the earth and the ancestors. This is like, hey, I'm going to show up in this web of connection. I'm going to wake up and connect to the living earth, that long, rich heritage of ancestry you were inviting us to tune to, Carl, in ourselves right here, the future beings. And what's the quote from Paul Shepard? That great and strange otherness, our siblings of all species, who we get to meet in the wilderness and in dreams. We've had so many powerful dreams. I'm sure perhaps you have too, who are listening, of animals visiting and making profound impressions and invitations. And the last two, I vow to support you in your work and to ask for help when I need it. And of course, not everybody is supporting everybody, but we can sort of energetically link arms and know there are so many people we will never meet leaning toward this great turning, this great remembering, and just say like, hey, I'm with you. I feel you. Yes. And to ask for help when we need it. And then
Yeah.
this last, oh, sorry, go ahead. You want to say something before I read the last one?
Right now, to listeners wherever you are, like imagine we're through this podcast, we're linking hands and committing to showing up in our own unique way together. That's great remembering, great
Mm.
turning.
Yeah. And the last one is I vow to pursue a daily practice that helps me to be able to do this, that helps to clarify my mind, strengthen my heart, support me to live like this. You know, I think that's so important. Whatever, even if the daily practice is different every day, to have something that funds our capacity to participate in life in this way is so important. So, all praise to beloved Joanna, um, yeah, for this beauty. I love these vows so much.
Hmm. That feels like a perfect closing of this conversation to just let those vows linger. And thank you, listener friends, for being with us. And may you find many ways to remember and reconnect to what is most essential, most important,
Mm.
you and your soul medicine in this
I,
world.
I'd love to close with one more from Jaiya. Jaiya John, beloved Jaiya, is so with us today, and I've got just this feels like a closing blessing from him. We are in the birth canal now. The great womb is in its pangs. No going back. Everything is at stake. Everything. Hold on to your ceremonies, and they had better all be love. A species is dying. It is us. Go far inside. Fetch life. Break yourself open. Become feast. Offer medicine. Fetch life. The soft soil of this life will not bed until you soften yourself as well. Your heart is asking you to touch it like you touch something you love. Before earth can flower, sky must cry. Your soul and life are earth and sky. Your heart is tender. Soften your life accordingly. Try not to screech at your heart when you can sing to it. Gentle your thoughts and language. Borrow the ways of light clouds and drifting feathers. Ease is a practice. Practice tenderly. When incense is burned, it releases its blessings. See if you can do this with the fires that test your life. A newborn thing is soft, vulnerable. Care for it. It will grow divinely. This too is true for a newborn year. And you are always a newborn thing. Praise the poets, praise the poets. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.